My name is Margaret Emily Cook Suarez, and I was born in 1946, April 6th.
And for the record, I'm Joe Suarez, and it's July the 15th, 2018. So you were born in Indiana. Where exactly in Indiana were you born?
It's about 15 miles south of Fort Wayne, which is in the northwest eastern part of Indiana. And our closer town was Decatur, which was about 6 miles away from the farm where we lived. So we didn't have to go very far to get things if we needed it.
Mm-hmm. And how was life growing up on the farm?
I loved it. Our father was the farmer, and it was a new thing for him to be that way too. He was not grown up as a farmer, but he worked very hard at it, and I was fascinated with all the things that he had to do when he was working. I wasn't allowed to drive the tractor or anything like that, but I could follow him around anytime as long as I stayed out of his way. And that's been a great thing over life, where I could, if I could remember things that he would do to fix or change or something, and then I might be able to do the same thing. But when he and our mother were married, first of all, he had to build the house for us to live in, and then he had to fix the barn, which had not been in use for quite a while. And so there was never a time when he didn't have something to do, and for me to wander around and get in the way and watch him. So that was my favorite thing to do. My sister's more of a book reader and didn't really follow around that much. And then when I was about 4th grade, I believe, we each got a bicycle. And it was the same thing. She drove around on her bicycle a little bit, but I went all over the place on my bicycle all day long. And that was a wonderful thing to have. We didn't have any other children close by, so we had to kind of make our own decision as to what to do. We had family. We had our aunt and uncle who lived right next door, and our aunt was beautiful. It was really wonderful with flowers. I would watch what she did, but I didn't remember very well. Unfortunately, I wish I had listened and watched better to see how she did it, because it was just wonderful flowers there. But that was one thing that I could wander around into, and she'd call for me if there was a snake, and I'd be the one to get rid of it. That was a lot of space for us to just kind of run around in the area. We had a beautiful trees all around, about 2/3 of our where we actually had our farm, where we had our houses, and we could walk back in there and see lots of different things right down to the river, which river was, I don't know, probably about 1.5 miles long, but it creaked around in different directions so many times that it's hard to tell, but it sort of went around part of the farm. So it was nice. Sometimes we'd go down to the river just have a little picnic down there, maybe some friends or cousins or that sort of thing. Have a little fun afternoon or lunchtime or something. And sometimes we got to pick grapes or Strawberries, our aunt had strawberries and a number of other berries that my mother would have to collect all those and then do something with them once she had them. But she did all that work. We were kids and we didn't have to work very hard, really. We were supposed to do certain things, but it wasn't like having to do all the things that our mother was doing. Of course, the house being built in 1940, in the 1940s, there wasn't a big, nice box that was the way you'd clean your clothes. You'd have to make the machine work and then do several things to make the machine work, and then get the water out of them and take them upstairs and hang them up outside if you wanted to get your clothes clean and dry. So we did have to do that, and when the things were drying, then we were expected to help get them off the road, the lines, especially if it was going to rain. And then when we were old enough, we had to iron our own clothes. We had to help with the dishes and a few things, cleaning our own bedroom, keeping our beds made, and pretty not difficult. We thought it was horrible, but we really weren't having to do anything very bad. Our grandmother would come almost every Sunday. She would come from Fort Wayne, and we would have dinner on Sunday. That was always a bigger meal, and once in a while there'd be company with that too. We'd have cousins from Ohio and cousins from Illinois, and they would be there sometimes. So that's kind of how childhood and up until getting out of school, that's the way things were. And as I say, I really loved being there, and still love to go by and talk to the people who live there now, who are taking very nice, they're really working on keeping everything in good shape with the big house our aunt lived in, and the small house that my dad built, and all the other buildings around too, to keep it in good shape.
So they're maintaining both houses?
Yes. They don't have the whole farm, the original farm. They just have the part where we lived in that one area. But that's still quite a bit of area to keep track of. They were so happy to get that farm when they did, or that piece of farm. They told us that when they were in high school, they would go together, or she and her husband, and when they would buy the houses there, they would look there and say, "Oh, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could live there?" And when the time came that our mother and everyone else was gone from there, and they saw that it was going to be up for sale, they got it, and they've just been in love with it.
So you mentioned schooling. Where was the schoolhouse in relation to the farm?
We were about 6 miles away, I guess. We were the last people onto the bus. We didn't have, in our township, we didn't have our own school. So it was up to us whether we wanted to go to one school or another, but almost everybody in the area would go to the closer one, which we did. Monmouth School, which was outside of Decatur, Indiana. And so we were lucky we only had to stand out there waiting for the bus to come for a very short time, and we were the first ones off in the afternoon then. Some of the kids were on the bus for almost 2 hours because they had to go around all these farms.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Some of them they had to even go on the driveway because it was over a mile back from the street, from the road, and the bus would go in for them. Monmouth was not very many students. In my sister's class, I think her class was 27 students in their class. And since I was a baby, but what did you call them? The baby.
Baby boomer?
When all the guys came back from the war, you know, and yeah. Well, we were right at the beginning of that, so we had a greater number of students, and ours was about 42, I think. That was the biggest one they'd ever had, I think. My last year in school, well, my sister ahead of me, she was three years in school ahead of me because she was so smart. They put her ahead in about 4th grade. So she was, and I always thought, well, that was wonderful, but later in life when we talked about it, she said, well, you know, I was a lot younger than these other students ahead of me, you know, and I came in there, you know, and it was not so easy as she thought, or you might think it would be, I guess, but as far as schools goes, she was on the top. She was the valedictorian. So then in high school, I was only in high school with her for 1 year, which was kind of nice, really. I mean, in a small group like that, everybody knows who everybody is and what. But I felt a little bit more like I could be me, and she was not going to be there. Then for the last year of school, my mother really kind of pushed down on me, and she said, you know, the school that you're going to go to college next year, in another year, and you really need to get some more out of your classrooms than you can get from this little school, since our mother was she taught in high schools and she knew. And I dragged my feet. I didn't want to do it. You know, it was going to be something different. I didn't want anything. Finally, the day we were supposed to start school, I said, well, okay. So I went to the other school in Decatur, which wasn't so horrible because I did know people there. I was in Girl Scouts in Decatur, all through Scouts in school. And also we went to the church and we knew people there. So it wasn't as if I was just off in a corner and, you know, afraid of anything. And I had to work hard that year. And my mother was right. You know. I managed to get through all the math you could do in that school, and it was enough that I didn't have to do any more when I got to college, which really, I was happy, because I didn't want to do that kind of thing in college.
So let's talk about college. So you graduate from Monmouth, is that how you pronounce it?
Monmouth.
Mm-hmm. And
well, no, I graduated from Decatur.
Oh, Decatur. Okay, yeah. Sorry. And then how did you end up picking the school you went to?
Well, of course, my sister had been ahead of me, and that's a good thing when you have somebody ahead of you. You can kind of watch what's going on to them and decide what you're going to do or not do. But and I had gone along with my mother when she took them around, my sister, to where she would maybe want to go. So my mother and I had got in the car and were on for about, I don't know, 3 days anyway, mostly in Ohio and looking at different places where I might want to go. I wanted to go to Worcester, which is over sort of south of Cleveland. And what I thought was so nifty was they had a band that was all the ones who marched in the band, they had to wear the costumes of the people from northern England. And they had the bagpipes and all that stuff, and I just thought that was really neat because my grandmother talked to us about all that sort of thing from her side of the family. And it was a nice school, nice, good size, and not too far away and all that. But they didn't take me, so then I had to start thinking again, and I ended up with Wittenberg in Springfield, Ohio, which is where I went, and was very happy there. And when we were getting ready to go to college, they would send us a notice. This person is your name that's going to be your pal in your room when you get there. And the girl happened to be from Worcester. So I got a little bit of Worcester out of it after all.
Yeah.
She's a very nice woman. She's still a very nice woman. So that's how I got there.
Was that Sue Cloak?
Pardon me?
Was that Sue Cloak that you were?
No, I didn't know Sue until I got to college, and I didn't know her for a little while. But one day I was sitting in the room and doing on some of my work, and she knocked on the door and she said, "I play in the band, and somebody said, is there anybody? Do you know anybody who's can play clarinet? There's this list here." And she looked at the list and she said, "Well, this person's in my room, my dorm. I'll go and talk." That was me. Mm-hmm. She came and found me, and I wanted to be in the orchestra. I'd never been in an orchestra, and I was planning to do that. And anyway, she dragged at me and pretty much dragged me over to be in the band, and of course that was something really new too with Sue, because we've been together ever since then. I really knew her for years, and we had a good time in the band. And I gave up the orchestra, not because I didn't like the orchestra, but we had a director who was absolutely horrible. And I just wasn't going to put up with it another year.
What was your musical experience before that? Was there a lot of music back at the farm?
My grandmother, to begin with, had a piano in her house, which had been where my mother lived, of course, as a child, and she knew how to play the piano, and my aunt, Cotty, who lived on the farm, also could play the piano. So when my sister Jeannie was she was in school, but not very far in school, my aunt started to teach her how to play the piano. The only way they could do that was to get the piano from Fort Wayne to our house, which they did. And then I got kind of interested, so maybe my aunt could teach me also, but I wouldn't practice enough, so she gave up on me and just kept teaching my sister how to do it better. But the piano was always in the house, and I could always sit down at it and pick around with it. And starting with one hand, I would learn things, and then finally I must be able to do two hands, and eventually I could do something sort of similar that you might think was music. and so we had that right in the house. I don't remember just how it happened, but in the small school of Monmouth, there was hardly any musical anything. This wonderful man came from a close by other town, and he was our music person, band, choir, anything music. There was not a whole lot. And he got together enough of a band that we were able to actually do something. So he started with my sister, of course, ahead of me. She played the flute. And then when I was I think I was in sixth grade, I started playing the clarinet. Now there was a book in our house that my aunt in Cleveland had given to us. The book was about all kinds of musical instruments. And I opened it and I looked in it and I thought, these were kind of neat, you know. And it was just black and white, of course, nothing else, but with actual people standing there or sitting there with their instrument. And it would say all sorts of things about each one of these. And I looked at those a lot of times, so I really had my eye on what I wanted to play when it got to be the time. So I started playing the clarinet. And our director, our teacher at the school, would stay after school for anybody who wanted to and could afford to take lessons, even through the summer. And not very many people, besides my sister and me, did that, but there were maybe 4 or 5 who he could keep teaching. And so that put us a little ahead of most of the rest of them there and really got us into it. My sister went to college ahead of me, of course, and she took her flute with her and played a little bit, but she never really kept up with it. But I went straight through it with my clarinet right there. Got into it and stayed there. You start to get rid of one of those.
Yeah. So Sue Cloak gets you to join the band.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then are you eventually roommates with her?
In college, not a roommate. We were in the same building for 2 years.
Okay.
And then she was in one of the Greek groups for the last 2. But, we were close to each other and a small area of getting around to people, and if you didn't have a car or anything. So we'd see each other a lot. And when we got through college, she went to work with her father. He decided he wanted to have this old-fashioned store. And she was very involved then with looking for everything they would need for that. And they went all over a lot of places, mostly in New England, because that was the type of thing they were thinking of. Mm-hmm. Even when we were in college, she was somewhat involved with the whole thing. And she went right into that after college, and I went off to work for the Girl Scouts in Lorain, Ohio. And Lorain, Ohio happened to be just down the road from where Sue's family still is. And so I got a place to stay for 1 year without very much money, because they had a house that she and I could stay in for a while, and then her parents came from New York, where he had been staying, where they had been, so that they could be where they wanted to have this store thing that they were making. So, after that, we were pretty much together all the time. I was off in Illinois for 3 years for the Girl Scouts, and on the 3rd year, she and her husband, who was also clarinet player in the band. They came to me and they said, well, I'm trying to remember how this worked. Yeah, she said that we'd like, if you don't want to work with Girl Scouts. I was kind of thinking about looking for something else. Would you like to go into this business with us? And we have an opening at one of the stores. By this time they had 3 stores, and we needed somebody in charge there. Well, I kind of thought about that. And, okay, I'll do it, So that took me to Dayton, Ohio. And I was working there then for about a year. And after that time, Sue was going to have a baby, and they felt they'd need somebody at their main building in Huron, Ohio. So they asked if I would come up and live there, back in Huron, where I had been at one time before. So I was okay with that. So we went. I worked for our company for 27 years, and it was more like a family thing, really. And they made me feel that way anyway. And it was a lot of fun to go to different places, start out new stores, and get them going, or maybe you might have to change it in some way, and of course you'd have to go back and forth to make sure everything was going all right. And for the most time it was fun.
Mm-hmm. So I know you moved around a lot in different places. Was that mostly for Girl Scouts?
When I was working, you mean?
No, I guess right after college.
Right after college, I went right to work for the Girl Scouts in Lorain, Ohio, where I was for 3 years. And that's what I wanted to do, to get out of college. Not to get out, but I mean, that's the thing that I wanted to do after I was out of college. And I remember going to talk to somebody in Dayton when I lived there, I guess I was still in college. You had to go and talk to somebody, and they looked you over, and then they decide whether you might be Girl Scout-ish enough to take this on, And there wasn't any, they didn't hesitate, so I did that. Of course, summers for 10 years, I was in Girl Scout camps in the summers. So, in fact, that was the hardest thing, I think, not having camp the next summer. And I really missed that for several years. It was very hard.
Did you live in or near Chicago for a bit?
Juliet in Illinois, that's fairly close to Chicago. It's about an hour's drive. So yeah, I was 3 years there, doing the same kinds of things I had done in Ohio too, and keeping up on the people who are supposed to be in charge of various things and running the camp and all that.
So you end up in Huron. Yeah, where does Dad come into the picture? When did you guys meet?
Oh, Dad, yeah, there is him. When I was living near Dayton, working there that 1 year, a friend of mine who lived in Columbus, I would go back and forth to see her, and she was a friend of Sue also. We'd all been in college, in the same college, and this woman was blind. She went through college. She could walk around the whole campus, and except when it snowed. She could not hear. Everything's so quiet, when there's snow. Otherwise, she could go all over that place. She couldn't drive, of course. She worked as a teacher in Columbus, and I would go over to see her because I was living in Dayton. And so one time I said, well, can I come over? You want to do something? And she said, sure. There's somebody's going to help me. He's going to come and move a piece of furniture. He's going to come and do that. So I said, okay. I got over there. I thought the way she spoke it, I thought it was a young guy, maybe in college, but probably in high school. So this guy came in with long, dark, black hair and one of those
Sideburns,
things, sideburns. And I sort of, oh, okay. How old are you anyway? So that's when we met. And he had met her from working with one of those where somebody calls and they're saying that they want to kill themselves or something like that. And you work with them and try to get them to calm down and that sort of thing. The two of them had each worked in that thing. So there we were. Suddenly this guy thought, who is this? And maybe I should pay attention to this woman. And I didn't think too much about it, but he seemed like a nice guy, so that was the start. So we'd go back and forth to see each other, and then I moved up to Huron, and well, then, he lived in Huron, in Columbus, and came to Huron, and for a while he wasn't so sure about Huron, whether that would be a good place for him to land, but he thought it over, and since I was working with this company, and I was going to be working with this company for a long time, I decided it would be better if we were going to go together, that he would come to Huron, and so we did.
Is that when you guys lived in the house that was all metal?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes, and there still are many of those around, and especially in Ohio. They were built in Ohio, and I have a couple of books actually that were written about it. And
were they post World War II?
Yeah, well, actually, still a little before the war was over, but they knew that they were going to need housing for all these guys when they came home, and there wasn't enough wood to build fast enough, and these metal houses were actually, I think they were cheaper, but anyway, they were so solid that people are still living in them and they're just fine. The problem was to get the money to do it, because money was pretty thin at that time. So they gave a certain amount of money, whatever it was. It was a lot of money, and they got started. And once people started to find out that there were these houses, they just started pouring in and asking for them. We want them, we want them. But they couldn't get enough money fast enough to make it work. People didn't want to work, wait 5 years to get a house. And the government cut it off. If they had kept going, probably we'd still be living in them. But we got to live in one.
Okay. So at what point did you guys get married? Were you still living in that house?
Yes, we were living in that house when we got married. And we lived there, I think it was maybe 3 years by the time we got to the house that we bought. And the only house that we bought.
On mud brick.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Well, so what year were you married?
What year were we married? 1976.
Okay. And then you bought the Mudbrook house in, like, what, 78, 79?
78, I think it was. Maybe 77. It was kind of near the end of the year. I forget which one.
And I can do the math from that point because I was born in December of 79.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, you came along there somewhere.
So what do you remember of early days in the Mudbrook house?
We were there for a little while, and then you came along. Your dad was working very hard. Lots of long days, and I was working for the Wileswood group, and which was nice to be just around the corner. I could walk there if I needed to. And so you came along. In the beginning, I worked 2 days a week after you were born. And you were with a babysitter. And as you got older, I would work more during the days. But actually, they were so flexible with me. It was really nice. And, something came up, unless it was some really important thing that had to happen on one day, they would say, well, okay, do that and come back the next day or something. Or just get to it when you can. So that was very helpful. And, well, I don't know, I enjoyed having you in the house, doing things with you and your friends, and getting into school, the usual things that you would do. Meanwhile, as they say, your dad was working away all week, doing very good. We were lucky to be able to travel a little bit once in a while, and we would go back to the farm in Indiana to see Grandma and Grandpa cook, whom you probably didn't remember very well, your grandpa. But the other side of the family, my sisters, and try to get people together several times a year anyway. That was fun. I know not one time, but many times we would be driving and he would say, how much longer? Are we there yet? Or something like that. How much longer is this going to be? What else did we do?
Went to Lake Gage.
Yeah, we went to Lake Gage, that's right.
Near Angola, Indiana,
Mm-hmm.
the closest town.
Yeah. And eventually later on we went to a lot of other lakes right in that area. And those were fun. All the kids jumping off the boats and losing their money in the water and things like that. That was always something. When we were kids, we just, I don't know, maybe Jeannie wasn't so excited, but I was always so excited to go to the lake. I just about blew out before we could get there, and never wanted to leave.
What lake did you guys go to as kids?
Pardon?
You said you and Jeannie as kids would go to lakes? Or were you talking about later?
Yeah, that was later than
Okay.
than when just she and I were there.
Mm-hmm.
My mother's the reason we could be there was my mother was had a friend from college, and the friend owned the building, well, two buildings that they had there at the lake. So we could go for nothing.
I remember there were old cottages. When do you think those were built? Like the
Those
30s
things
or
were really
40s?
sort of made for just fishing shanties.
Mhm.
And especially the one that we stayed in. I'm not sure how far back that would. They would be back before the 20s, 1920s,
Oh, really?
I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah, they were pretty rustic.
I haven't been back past there. I should do that one of these times when I go west. When the owners both had died, her family, I think, there was no family with the others, with the two of them, really.
Mhm.
So there were cousins or somebody from Iowa, I think. And last time that either Jeannie or I had gone by there, I think those owners still owned it, and it looked just about the same as it had always, except worse.
Mhm.
And then there was that
can
third
imagine.
house that they took on,
Yeah.
and they would people who worked for them would stay in that, and sometimes once in a while once or twice we used that also. But it seems to me that somebody said that maybe the older two are not there anymore. But I'm going to have to find
I
out.
would be surprised. Was it like one? Would it be considered one piece of property that they were both on? Because I just remember the sidewalk would
The
split to
two
the two.
original ones, I think, is one piece.
Mhm.
The other one with the White House on it would be separate, I think.
So it wouldn't be surprising to see both of those gone in one big house there now.
Right.
You know?
'Cause that's the big thing to do right now, is just get the biggest house you can possibly put on the lake,
Mhm.
whether you need it or not. Yeah, that was fun.
Well, we've covered. I think we've gone through your life to this point. Did we miss anything or anything
Well-
you want to discuss?
Well, after you came along, and then you went through school, and you made a life for yourself and all that. So here you are.
Sure.
Yeah. There's lots of stuff, especially if I get pictures out or something, there'd be a lot of things that would come to my mind. But that's pretty much the skeleton of it anyway.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I would say I can't have any reason to complain about any of it. It's been pretty good.
Yeah, it sounds like it.